Monique Gilbertson was 68 years old and lived in a quiet mobile home community reserved for residents over the age of 55 in the East Las Vegas Valley. To her neighbors, she was part of the everyday rhythm of the place. Like the clock that chimes at the same hour each morning, Monique could be seen walking her dog along the familiar streets. Her steps were steady and her greetings predictable. She was the kind of presence that gave a neighborhood its sense of continuity. In communities like these, each resident becomes a thread in a larger quilt. Monique's peace was bright and reliable. She waved to neighbors watering their yards and paused to chat in the cool shade of a porch. Her dog was the companion that made her routine visible and memorable. Much like the sound of a familiar song drifting through the walls, her presence was quietly reassuring. That rhythm began to falter in late October. One day, the leash was absent. Another day, her porch sat quiet. Like a missing page in a book, the story no longer made sense. Neighbors noticed the silence and wondered what could have changed. In places where people grow older together, absence speaks louder than words. Behind this quiet change, another subplot was already in motion. Monique had opened her home to someone she thought could help her manage daily tasks. That decision seemed small at the time, like lending a hand on a staircase, but it would become a turning point in her life. Her disappearance did not come all at once. It crept in like dusk settling over the desert sky. And as the days stretched without her familiar walk, the question grew heavier. Where was Monique Gilbertson? The story of how Monique Gilbertson crossed paths with Daniel, also known as Jazlynn Roush, began in a place many people know well. It was at a Home Depot in Las Vegas in the year 2024. For some, hardware stores are only about nails, paint, and tools, but for Monique, it became the starting point of a relationship that would reshape her life. She met Roush there and decided to hire her for small maintenance tasks around her home. At first, it seemed like a practical choice. Much like trusting a gardener to care for the roses, Monique trusted that an extra pair of hands could make life easier. That simple arrangement slowly grew into something larger. Monique allowed Roush to move into her home. She was 68, and the idea of company along with help around the house may have seemed like a reasonable trade. For neighbors, it looked ordinary. It was like watching someone invite a new chess partner to the weekly game. On the surface, it felt practical and harmless, but relationships in shared spaces are much like plants sharing the same soil. If one grows too wild, it can overtake the other. Over time, tensions began to show. Concerns over cleanliness surfaced. Reports of items missing began to circulate. What had started as cooperation now felt uneasy. The bond between the two women was fraying. Monique eventually decided to act. She asked Roush to leave and even changed the locks on her home. That moment was the clearest signal that trust had broken. For anyone who has ever lent out a favorite book and never had it returned, the feeling is familiar. It is disappointment mixed with the quiet knowledge that something once reliable may no longer be safe. Behind these changes, another subplot was taking shape. While neighbors still saw Monique in her regular routine, a new tension was building inside her home. It was the kind of strain that cannot always be seen from the outside, like cracks forming under the paint of a wall. The decision to invite Roush in had begun as a gesture of trust. By the time Monique replaced the locks, that trust had been reduced to silence. The question remained, would this break be the end of their connection or the beginning of something far more troubling? The last confirmed sighting of Monique Gilbertson was around October 22nd in the year 2024. For neighbors who saw her daily, that date became etched in their memory. She was known for walking her dog, a routine that gave shape to the mornings and evenings in her quiet mobile home community. Her absence was like a missing note in a song everyone had grown used to hearing. At first, the silence seemed temporary. People step away for errands or family visits. But as one day became two and two became a week, questions grew louder. The path that once held the sound of her footsteps now carried only the desert wind. The leash was unseen, the dog remained out of sight, and the house appeared still. In a place where neighbors noticed the smallest details, that stillness spoke volumes. Monique had been a consistent figure, like the porch light that always turns on at dusk. When that light goes dark, people notice. Her neighbors began to check in, knocking on her door and looking for movement inside. Each unanswered knock deepened the concern. It was as if a chapter had been torn from the middle of a book, leaving the story without direction. By early November, the unease had become unavoidable. People compared notes, realizing they had not spoken to her in weeks. The last walk with her dog, the last wave on the street, all felt distant. In a community built on familiarity, her sudden disappearance felt unnatural. The absence of her daily presence was a warning bell, much like a clock that fails to chime at the top of the hour. Behind these observations, another subplot lingered. Daniel, also known as Jazlynn Roush, had once been inside that home. Neighbors knew the history, the tension, the eviction. The thought that Monique's silence might connect to that past began to hover unspoken. It was this growing awareness that led someone to request a welfare check on November 6th. The concern of a community rooted in daily observation had turned into action. The quiet streets of the East Las Vegas Valley now held a question too heavy to ignore. Where had Monique gone, and why had she vanished from view? On November 6th in the year 2024, Las Vegas police arrived at Monique Gilbertson's home.
Jesus.
I'm so sorry. I was like, I just got a shower. I rent this place.
What's your name?
My name's Jazlynn.
Where's Monique at?
Monique is I'm house sitting right now. She left town for a while.
Where is she? No, she didn't. Where is she?
No, she really did. I swear.
Okay.
Oh, sh. Okay. So it opens up here to the right, clear this right hallway. Yeah.
Sorry. I was like, I just got a shower.
Yeah,
what's going on?
Okay,
yeah, we've been knocking.
Well, I rent this place.
What's your name?
My name's Jazlynn.
Where's Monique at?
Monique is I'm house sitting right now. She left town for a while.
Where is she? No, she didn't. Where is she?
No, she really did. I swear.
Okay, where is she?
She doesn't go anywhere without her dogs.
Yeah, I know. I've been saying that's what she had. She had an emergency. She had to go to her brother in the East Coast. So, you know what I mean? Like she's not here right now. What do you want me to do about it?
Listen, we're just trying to get in touch with Monique because we came here to check her safety because no one's heard from her.
Like, you know, because do I need to call my lawyer? Like, and have
No. Well, once again, all we care about is the safety and well-being of Monique. Yeah, well, I really wonder what happened to the fucking Monique.
Is that blood?
No, I think that's in the freezer.
Yep.
If there's a body in here, dude.
I swear to God. He's freaking out saying we can't open it.
Of course he is.
I swear to God, bro. My heart's racing.
Jeez.
That changed quickly. Inside one of the rooms, they found a large freezer. It had been covered up and locked shut.
Yep.
It's right here. I think. It's like an Allen key.
Without a key, the officer struggled to open the freezer. Luckily, the locksmith was still there, and it didn't take him long to crack the lock.
If there's a body in here, dude.
I swear to God.
But the moment Daniel realized they were about to open it, he snapped. He shouted that they had no right to touch the freezer, which only made the officers more certain they had to know what was inside.
He's freaking out saying we can't open it. He's freaking out saying we can't open it.
Of course he is.
Yeah.
I know the smell.
She had been the last known person to spend time inside Monique's home. In stories of trust and betrayal, it is often the familiar figure, not the stranger, who becomes central. Investigators began piecing together the timeline, noting the uneasy history between the two women and the unresolved tension left behind. Community recollections supported this direction. Some neighbors reported seeing signs of activity at the residence even after Monique had vanished. Like footprints in sand that point to movement, these small observations carried meaning once investigators compared them. Roush quickly moved from a name on a list to the prime suspect in Monique's death. The trust once given to her by Monique now stood in sharp contrast to the accusations she faced. The subplot of companionship had turned into the central line of inquiry. As officers looked closer, the unanswered questions grew. Why had she stayed near the home after being asked to leave? What role had she played in the days between Monique's last sighting and the grim discovery in the freezer? The facts were enough to point suspicion, but the full story was not yet complete. The community waited, much like readers pausing on a page, eager and uneasy about what the next chapter would reveal. The prosecution painted a grim picture. According to their account, Daniel, also known as Jazlynn Roush, had not only betrayed Monique Gilbertson's trust, but had done so in a calculated way. They alleged that Roush Force fed Monique a massive dose of fentanyl, not just enough to silence, but enough to overwhelm. Toxicology tests showed levels nearly 200 times greater than what experts define as lethal. It was as if a cup had been filled not with a few drops, but with a flood that no vessel could contain. Fentanyl itself is a synthetic opioid. In medicine, it is used with caution to treat severe pain, measured in micrograms and carefully monitored. But outside that controlled setting, it is unforgiving. A dose no larger than a few grains of salt can stop breathing. To compare, it is like using a sledgehammer where only a small tap was needed. The power of the drug is its danger. The state argued that the evidence of overdose could not be explained by accident. The sheer volume suggested intention. Prosecutors maintained that Monique could not have ingested that level on her own, and they framed the discovery of her body in the freezer as further proof of concealment. For them, the narrative was clear. This was not self-harm, it was homicide. Yet the defense pushed back. They presented an alternate possibility, one that cast doubt on the prosecution's certainty. They argued that Monique herself may have taken the drug willingly. They reminded the court that substance use can sometimes involve risky amounts, and that without direct proof of how the fentanyl entered her system, the case remained circumstantial. It was like seeing the ripples on a pond without knowing which stone had been thrown. The toxicology report became the battlefield. Each side leaned on experts to interpret the same science in different ways. To the prosecution, the numbers were a fingerprint of murder. To the defense, they were an open question. In courtrooms, facts often sit in the middle while stories pull at both ends. Here, too, the truth seemed to balance on a knife's edge. What happened in those final moments remained the mystery. The answers lay in chemical traces and human choices, in medicine turned into poison. And as the case moved forward, the community and the courtroom alike braced for a verdict that could tilt either way. The investigation that began with a welfare check quickly shifted into a criminal case. Detectives who uncovered Monique Gilbertson's body inside the freezer of her own home focused their attention on one familiar figure. Daniel, also known as Jazlynn Roush, the 37-year-old who had once lived with Monique, became the center of suspicion. In the days that followed, police gathered evidence, interviewed neighbors, and tracked movements that tied Roush to the home after Monique was last seen. On November 6th, law enforcement formally arrested Roush. The charges filed included second-degree murder along with related counts tied to the concealment of a body. Second-degree murder is a serious classification. It signals that prosecutors believe the death was not accidental, yet also not planned far in advance. In simple terms, it sits between the sharp edge of premeditated first-degree murder and the lesser gravity of manslaughter. It is like standing at a crossroads between intention and impulse, a charge that reflects both severity and uncertainty. In early court appearances, Roush stood before the judge and entered a plea of not guilty. That plea set the stage for what lies ahead, a trial in which evidence and arguments will be tested before a jury. The not guilty plea did not erase the allegations, but it reminded all watching that the law begins with presumption of innocence. It is a safeguard that holds even in cases where emotions run high and the facts appear heavy. Courtrooms are often compared to scales. On one side rests the weight of prosecution claims, on the other, the defense's counter-arguments. At this early stage, both sides were positioning themselves, filing motions, and shaping narratives. Each hearing added small details, yet the larger picture remained unresolved. For Monique's neighbors, who once saw her walking her dog each morning, the case now lived in the language of indictments and legal motions. What began as concern over a missing woman had transformed into a search for accountability within the walls of a courtroom. The journey from arrest to trial can be long, filled with delays and contested facts. Yet it is the pathway that decides whether suspicion becomes conviction or whether doubt carries the day. And in that gap between accusation and verdict, the story of justice continues to unfold. The death of Monique Gilbertson left a deep mark on her community in the East Las Vegas Valley. Neighbors who once waved to her each morning now look to her quiet home as a reminder of absence. Her story has become both personal and symbolic, a tale that speaks to the strength and fragility of community life. Like a missing stone in a pathway, her absence changed the way people walk through their days. At the heart of this tragedy is generosity turned against itself. Monique welcomed Daniel Roush into her life, believing that companionship and help with household tasks would bring ease. That decision, made in the spirit of trust, instead opened the door to conflict and ultimately to her death. It is a reminder that kindness can sometimes leave one vulnerable, especially for older individuals who may rely on others for daily support. The case also revealed the silent dangers of drugs like fentanyl. In quantities so small it could sit on the tip of a pencil, fentanyl has the power to end life. The toxicology reports in this case highlighted how devastating its impact can be. It is not only a crisis in the headlines, but a danger. If Monique's story moved you, let it be more than just a story. Share this video to raise awareness about protecting vulnerable members of our communities. Leave a comment with your thoughts on how neighbors and families can better safeguard the elderly. And if you believe every life deserves vigilance and justice, subscribe and join us as we continue to uncover the truths that should never be forgotten. That can reach into homes and neighborhoods. For many in Las Vegas, the mention of fentanyl now carries the weight of Monique's name. The lessons from her death are sober. Communities must remain attentive to the safety of their elders. Trust should be given carefully, with awareness of the risks that come when dependence meets exploitation. Families and neighbors are often the first line of protection, and their vigilance can make the difference between safety and harm. Monique's story does not end with the courtroom or the headlines. It lingers in conversations at doorsteps and in reflections shared across the valley. Her life was marked by routine, presence, and connection. Her death is marked by grief, caution, and calls for greater protection of the vulnerable. In the end, Las Vegas was reminded that even in a city known for lights and noise, the quiet stories matter most. One woman's absence has left a lasting shadow, urging all who hear it to remember that trust is precious, life is fragile, and vigilance is necessary.